This Saturday, we have UFC 291, which is absolutely stacked, looking to be possibly the best card of the year up to this point, and we have guys like Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Kevin Holland, all across this card. Alex Pereira making his light heavyweight debut, and I want to talk about some of my predictions for this card, how I think this card is going to go, and what to expect from these fights. Kicking off this card is one of my personal favorites, and I know a big fan favorite of a lot of UFC fans. Kevin Holland will be taking on Michael Chiesa in his return. Chiesa hasn't fought since November of 2021, and this fight is going to be fireworks from start to finish. Kevin Holland is looking to make his way back into the rankings after he has had 5 fights moving up to welterweight, going 3-2 over that bout. But if he can win this match against a 12th ranked Michael Chiesa, he could find his way back into the rankings. But Chiesa is definitely no pushover. We've seen how great he is. We just haven't seen him in a while. And since that injury in November of 2021, Kevin Holland has had 5 fights like I just mentioned. So in this fight, I know I'm a big Kevin Holland fan overall, but I do think he's going to take this win. He is a Kung Fu master, as he has said a million times, and we all know this by now. But I do think he wins this by knockout within the 3 rounds. I do think this could be a knockout in the 2nd or 3rd round. I don't think it'll be an easy fight for Kevin Holland, but I do think with the rankings in his way, in his eyes, he will go in and get the knockout finish in this fight. Next up on the card, we have Tony Ferguson coming back, trying to get a win against Bobby Green, and this fight is a very hard one to predict in my opinion. I know if you look at the records, Tony Ferguson hasn't won a fight in his last 5 fights, but I am backing him in this contest against Bobby Green, despite the lines and Tony Ferguson being a plus 350-ish favorite, depending on where you look at it. I'm taking that plus money here. He has a lot to prove in this fight. Bobby Green isn't an easy opponent though. He's going to come in here and try to knock the lights out of him. Both of these guys are going to try to take each other's head off. We've already seen some bad blood brewing between these two guys. I do think Bobby Green's a decent fighter, but I'm going to back Tony in this fight, and I know that's hurt a lot of bettors, especially within the past few years, considering he's been favored in some of his past fights, these past 5 fights that he's lost. But I'm going to back him here, as I think he is hungry and he needs this fight to kind of stay alive in the UFC. He would get fights after this if he loses, but this is kind of his chance in his redeeming arc to have one more run towards the end of his career, and I'm backing him. Our next fight on this card is Wonder Boy Thompson at 40 years old, taking surging contender Michael Pereira on, who's only 29 and has been racking up wins recently. And one bet that I do think will hit in this fight is I do think this will probably go to decision. I mean, looking at both of these fighters, Thompson's average fight time, 14 minutes 51 seconds. Pereira with 13 minutes. I do not see a 1st or 2nd round finish in this fight. I do think they're going to dog it out, but I do definitely see this one going to decision overall. And the line's very close. Thompson the favorite at minus 150, but Pereira does have that underdog line of plus 130. So it will be very close. And like I said earlier, the under over for rounds at 2.5 is minus 220 to go over. I do think that's a good bet. I know the odds aren't the greatest, but this is a good fight between these two fighters, and despite Pereira only being 29 years old, he already has 39 MMA fights under his belt, and I am going to take him here. I do think he'll be able to come out and win by decision. I do think Wonder Boy's trying to get that last surge in his career at 40 years old, like I mentioned earlier, but the takedown defense is just absolutely amazing from Pereira overall, and the takedown accuracy too is great. I just have him winning, and especially at an underdog, that's a great bet too. Next up, the fight I personally have been looking forward to the most, and the most excited I am throughout this whole card, is Alex Pereira moving up to take on Jan Blachowicz in a light heavyweight clash that is going to be a fight for the ages. I think this is going to be a fantastic fight, and I think there's a good reason why these lines are so close between these two. Obviously, Pereira, coming off of his loss against Izzy, isn't a great look for him because he beat him in the first fight in the UFC. You can go back and talk about their history in the past, but in the second fight, gets knocked out in the second round after Izzy said that he was playing possum, and then goes in and hits him with that shot that we have all seen by now. But he has just been so big in these fights that he's going to move up to light heavyweight, and this is not an easy first fight. But if he can go in and win this fight, then this obviously proves that he should get a title shot. And I did, along with a lot of other UFC fans, do think that this should be the title fight if there is a vacant title. But as we know, Jan does have a lot of history with vacant title fights. Jan's last fight ended in a draw in a light heavyweight vacant title bout, and with that draw, Dana White decided to, instead of giving them a rematch, he would put the Jamal Hill Glover Teixeira fight for the championship. And as we know, Jamal Hill won that fight, but just recently vacated the title after an injury. But Jan is still a fantastic fighter. I know he's starting to get up there in age a little bit, as he is now 40 years old, but he still looks absolutely amazing. I do think personally he did lose that last fight, but it did end up in a draw, so technically it doesn't go on his record, but he basically admitted to losing that fight too. At the end of the fight, we did see him point towards Magomed as the winner, but it was a draw overall, and this is going to be a great fight. The one thing I'm looking towards, though, will Alex Pereira be able to handle those huge shots that are going to come from Jan? That's the one thing. If we see him get rocked right away from one of those punches, it could be smelling a quick ending. But if he's able to take some of those shots within the first 2 rounds, I would feel confident in Alex Pereira, and I'm going to give him my backing in this fight. I do think it's going to be a very close fight. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a knockout early either way, just because both of these fighters are so strong. But that being said, I wouldn't be surprised if both of their chins do hold up and we go to decision. I do think this will either go to decision or end very early. I don't really see this getting to the 3rd round and these guys kind of duking it out then. I do think that Alex Pereira will come out as the winner, but the first round, specifically the first shot that he takes, that first big shot, will tell tale how this fight will finish. Finally, in the main event, we do have the BMF title being back up for grabs, as Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje have a rematch of their previous fight that happened in 2018, and a lot has changed for both of them since then. Since then, in the past 5 fights, Dustin Poirier is 4-1, and he's coming off of a 3rd round submission win against Michael Chandler. And on the opposite side, we have Justin Gaethje, who just recently outboxed and outstriked Rafael Fiziev, who was a great striker going into that fight. I do still think he's a great striker, but it was very surprising to see Gaethje go out there and outstrike him, as I thought Fiziev was one of the best strikers within that weight class. But Gaethje, as we know, he's earned a bunch of these performance bonuses just because he's willing to go out there and scrap and fight it out, and sometimes that can be his downfall, and that could potentially be his downfall in this fight. Despite having a background as a wrestler, Gaethje just doesn't seem to use it at this point, and it's worked out for him in his past fight, but we'll have to see what happens when he takes on Dustin Poirier in this rematch. This is going to be a close fight, and it is very reflected on the odds, as these odds are very close between these two guys at this point. Dustin Poirier is the favorite right now as I record this, but these lines are very close, as Poirier's a -135 and Justin Gaethje's +115. So Gaethje would be considered the underdog, but I am going to take him in this fight. I think he'll be able to go out here and outstrike Dustin Poirier, and that will help him win this fight. I do think it will go over 2.5 rounds. I did place that as well, but I do think this fight could end in the 4th or 5th round. I'm not sure if both of these guys will make it all the way to the 5th round, and being in Salt Lake City, they will be elevated too. It's not very high considering other places that they could be in, anywhere really that the UFC has been before, like Calgary, where we did see Poirier knock out Alvarez there, but I do think it will impact this fight at least a little bit. I don't see it going to 5 rounds, but I am going to take Justin Gaethje overall. And that plus 130, that's not terrible. I would potentially take him too if you want to sprinkle a little bit on a long shot on maybe like a 4th or 5th round knockout. But overall, this is going to be a great main event, and I know a lot of people aren't a big fan of the BMF title. I don't really have too much of an opinion on it overall, but I'm very excited to see this fight and the much anticipated rematch, as the winner of this probably will go on to win a title fight, as it is a 2 versus 3 matchup right now. Even though both of these guys are kind of getting up there in age a little bit, whoever wins this fight will go on and get a title shot. If you guys have reached this part of the video, please like and let me know what your predictions are down below. And just remember, these are my predictions. Most of these probably won't be right, as we know the UFC can go either way, and that's why we love and watch this sport overall. But hopefully you guys do like some of my picks, and if we have some similar picks, let me know down below, and we'll see you guys in the next one.